Good morning and welcome to Stockholm this time. So welcome to the webinar, Circular Business Models, Building a Stronger and More Resilient Nordic Region in the New Geopolitical Landscape. So if you're going to be at this seminar about circularity, you're at the right seminar or webinar. So some practical things in the beginning. So if you want to ask questions, please use Menti. You can see it below. And you can see the code. And also, please share insights from this webinar on social media. And please mention Haga Initiative or Haga Initiative. And this is being recorded. And you can find it afterwards and share it from Haga Initiative's webpage. And you will find it in the end of this webinar. And my name is Nina Ekelund, and I'm the Executive Director of the Haga Initiative. So, very, very welcome. And we that are arranging this webinar is the Haga Initiative, and you can see the companies here. And we have a strategy to stay below 1.5 degrees. And this is our webinar today. And soon we will hear a keynote from Terry Lehtonen, who is the State Secretary in Finland, and also Jocelyn Blaireau from Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We're so glad that you both can join us. And then we will have a discussion, present a report, and we will have a discussion with politicians, and we will also hear the business perspective and have some comments on the report. And we're so glad because we have a fantastic group of speakers today. So we're really, really happy that you all could join us. This report and this webinar is arranged within the project Climate Neutral Nordics that is financed by Nordic Council of Ministers. And we are 3 business networks, Shift from Norway, Climate Leadership Coalition from Finland, and the Haga Initiative from Sweden that work together in a 4-year project within Climate Neutral Nordics. And the Nordics have a vision to become the most sustainable and integrated region in the world by 2030. And within Climate Neutral Nordics, we are working with a lot of projects, not only circularity, but in the end, we will try to fulfill, we will mapping business ambitions, strengthening business models, facilitating interaction between business and policy that we will do today, and also demonstrating climate benefits. So please check out the web pages from the Haga Initiative, from CLC in Finland, or from Shift. You can find what we are working with and what kind of projects we are working with. 1.5 years ago, we asked 40 CEOs from the Nordic countries, from big companies, what kind of obstacles do they see when it comes to circularity? And it was quite clear. They see a lack of recycled raw materials. There is a need for better legislation. The costs are higher for renewable materials. We have to change the behavior, and we need more collaboration. So that's what we heard. And that was our starting point when we started also to work with circularity within Climate Neutral Nordics. And all these companies that we interviewed represent 24% of the GDP in the Nordic region. So it's a lot. Recently, we got the report from World Economic Forum, the risk report for 2023. And looking at the 10-year period, we can see that climate and also biodiversity is on top as top risks. The only way or a very important contribution is what circularity and using our resources more efficiently is a way to lower the risk for climate and for biodiversity. So, and it will also change a lot of things. I just want to tell the technical team, I have a black screen. also, if we are going to manage, we do need to have circular economy to save our planet. So that is what we're going to talk about today. And also, we're going to find some really interesting perspectives on how we in the Nordic region can collaborate, and also how we can reduce the geopolitical risks by using more of circularity. You're very, very welcome, all of you. And also, I should say this also, looking at the geopolitical risks, we also know that all these critical metals that we need now in the climate transformation, we can see that it has increased by several 100%, all this kind of critical materials. We need them for windmills, we need them for electrical vehicles, and that is just one thing that really just we can see that we really need to go towards the circularity. And also we can see in the value chains for all the companies that it's really difficult if you don't get these materials. So circularity is also a way that is really important just to reduce that risk. So now I'm going to present our first speaker, and that's Terry Lehtonen. She's the State Secretary at the Ministry of Environment in Finland. Terry, are you with us?
I'm here. Good morning.
Great. Good morning, Terry. Great to have you with us, and I'm so glad to hear your perspective of circular economy in Finland that you've been working for a very long time, and your contribution to a more robust economy. Please, Terry.
Thank you, Nina, and dear Nordic friends. It is a real pleasure to join you at this webinar today. Let me begin by congratulating Haga Initiative and all the partners for the report and the webinar. Projects like this are an important way to enhance our joint Nordic efforts to achieve a more sustainable future together within the planetary boundaries. Circular economy is one of our key tools for reducing our climate and biodiversity impacts in Finland and globally. Our national work towards circularity was already initiated in 2016 when Finland published the world's first national roadmap to a circular economy. In the recent years, we have worked to further accelerate the transition. Last year, we adopted our new strategic program to promote circular economy and have started to implement it. In the program, we have set, for the first time, quantitative targets for circular economy, for instance, to decrease our total consumption of primary raw materials to 2015 levels by 2035, and doubling material efficiency and the share of recycled materials in all material use by 2035. The design and implementation of the program is done in a tight cooperation with the public and private sectors. Accelerating the transition requires everyone on board. To facilitate cooperation, we have launched a process towards circular economy green deals with key industries, companies, regions, and municipalities. Based on scientific analysis and scenario work facilitated by the government, the actors that join the agreement set meaningful circularity goals and define effective measures to achieve them. We have also recognized that there is a need for knowledge sharing and capacity building. To support this, the government has launched Circular Finland, a knowledge sharing network for businesses, public sector, and R&D organization, or RDI organization, I should say. The network helps in finding information, tools, support mechanisms, and cooperation partners. Again, we have started a circular design program that is a circular business and design accelerator for companies. The program is meant especially for business leaders, design and RDI specialists, and aims for capacity building. So we have quantitative targets, and we have already implemented some measures to work towards these targets. Right now, we need to continue to accelerate the implementation, and we need to monitor progress to make sure that we are effectively going to the right direction to achieve our targets. While we know that circular economy provides the necessary solutions for tackling climate change and biodiversity loss, circular economy can also contribute to the security of supply. Nearly a year ago, the geopolitical situation in Europe changed profoundly. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a serious violation of the principles of international law, the UN Charter, and the sovereignty of countries. Last autumn and this winter, we have seen how the Russian aggression against Ukraine has left millions of people without electricity and heat during the cold winter months. Our thoughts have been with Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. And our common European front to condemn the attack and oppose Russia has stayed strong, also while the resulting energy crisis has had serious impacts for European citizens, especially those who already struggled to make ends meet before. Russia's aggression against Ukraine has showed us that green transition and replacing fossil fuels with renewable energy is crucial for our security. We need and we want to increase our energy independence as we transition to climate neutrality. Circular economy will also be key for energy transition to be sustainable, something that Nina already alluded to. We need to reduce consumption and take every opportunity to recycle and reuse the minerals that have already entered our value chain. By keeping products and materials in use, less land is required for sourcing virgin raw materials, for instance, from mines. The need for circular economy revolution is urgently needed in the built environment. Building and construction have very high greenhouse gas emissions and huge material footprint. I hope we can already use better, more circular solutions and methods for the reconstruction of Ukraine to build back better. The war and energy crisis has heightened our awareness of another key area for accelerating green and circular transition: fertilizers. Moving away from non-renewable raw materials produced with fossil fuels to a circular use of nutrients and closed nutrient loops, or producing ammonia for fertilizers from green hydrogen and biogenic CO2 from forest industry operations, we can strengthen the security of supply and decrease our dependency on Russia while significantly reducing our environmental footprint. These actions do not only make our system more efficient and secure, but also reduce our climate impact, given our practically emission-free Nordic electricity production, and reduce leakage of nutrients to fresh water and marine environment. The key in circular economy is systems approach. We need to redesign our societies to respect the limited resources of the planet. In many respects, Nordic countries have been forerunners in sustainability. In the new geopolitical situation, this brings many benefits. Pioneering countries that have promoted and invested in clean solutions are among the winners. We are already cooperating actively in respect of regulating climate and material footprint of construction within the Nordic countries. We are also working hand in hand in respect of the EU construction products regulation in an attempt to make it fit for circularity. But I think, and as your report well points out, we can do even better. We must put our strategies fully in practice. We should work together to mainstream circular economy as the basis of our Nordic economies. We must remove barriers and find effective policies to support the transition. Like your report concludes, the Nordic countries can work closer together to harmonize taxes, thereby creating a larger market for Nordic circular solutions. Abolishing environmentally harmful subsidies and shifting taxation from labor to materials and pollution should be guiding principles in this cooperation. I couldn't agree more. We need to look at economic incentives, market-based instruments, and for instance, regulation regarding waste, both on national and regional level, as well as in the EU context. This could be, for example, also our work could be taxes on virgin materials, blending mandates for recycled materials, or common standards for circular economy in public procurement. At the same time as we continue to cooperate to enhance the circular transition of our Nordic region, we should also cooperate and support the transition to a circular economy worldwide to tackle the triple planetary crisis. Next May, the World Circular Economy Forum will return to Finland with a Nordic focus, as the co-host for the forum will be Nordic Innovation. I hope all of you will join the forum with us. Dear friends, once more, thank you to Haga Initiative, and thank you to all around this virtual table. You, if anyone, can put the accelerator on our transition. Thank you.
That was really, really interesting to hear the Finnish perspective. And I just want to ask you, you've been working with circularity for such a long time in Finland, and you're a fantastic role model. So what is the lesson Finland has learned so far in the transition to a circular economy that we might copy in other countries?
Well, one of the lessons that we have learned is that we need quantitative targets, and we need the monitoring and follow up. And obviously, we need to develop new policy tools. Moving economic incentives and drivers from linear to circularity required, I think, courage and skill. As our legislation, our standards, our consumer legislation is designed for a linear economy. And we need to find the new models of governance and cooperation. We need to develop the ecosystems that are necessary for this new model.
Great, and I just wonder, we just have to face it when we look at the circularity gap report, and when we can see when we look at the statistics, the transition. Is this your perspective as well, that the transition to a circular economy goes very, very slowly? You're nodding.
Agree. Yes, completely agree. I think
so why is it so?
Well, I think both societies and companies have invested a lot in the current operating models and the linear economy. So redesigning both consumption and production progresses, unfortunately, I think, slowly. My personal opinion is that we have not dared to put the prices right, or been ambitious enough in terms of production or product standards. And I think it has to be given, and I think your research that you alluded to in your opening remarks was that the designing of production for more variable and recycled materials, there might be a lack of recycled materials. It is more difficult, and sometimes we feel that the size of our economy may not be sufficient for the scale of that production to be economical. And this is why I think also the idea of cooperating more closely with Nordic countries and across Nordic countries in terms of businesses is probably necessary.
Fantastic. So also, do you have any more perspectives what policy can do to accelerate the transition?
Well, I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think we need to look at taxes. We need to, I think your report pointed out very well that we need to make sure that the use of virgin materials isn't cheaper than the use of recycled materials. We need to look at things like blending mandates, and we need to look at the standards for products to accelerate the transition. And we should look at this nationally, but also we should seek where we can maybe have a Nordic market, if you like, or cooperate for similar standards, unless we can see that the European Union is moving fast enough to accelerate the necessary transition.
You go ahead of our report, because that is one of our findings, that we need more of Nordic collaboration. We got one question from the audience, and I just want to see if is it any specific sectors that you have implemented circular efforts more in, and what kind of sector could that be?
Well, we have looked at a lot about with construction sector, the way construction sector operates in terms of, for example, the plastic waste they do, but we have also started moved ahead with regulating, with looking at material footprint of construction and climate standards for new construction And I think, and we have invested some of our recovery funding for developing new products in the construction sector. So that's one of the areas that we see is it has a really high impact in our environment, the construction sector. But then also we have plastics in general, circularity in plastics, developing economic incentives maybe for chemical recycling of plastic. Of course, then the bio-based, circular bio-based materials to replace the fossil-based materials is another key focus for Finland.
Thank you so much, Terry Lehtonen, that you could join us this morning and to hear also the perspective from Finland. It was really great. So big thank you, Terry Lehtonen.
Thank you for the invitation.
So let's move on. And I would like to present the next keynote speaker, and that's Jocelyn Blaireau, who's the executive lead for institutions, governments and cities from Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So, and Jocelyn, did I pronounce your name right? Jocelyn Blaireau, sorry for
It's fine.
asking.
It's, yeah, no,
How would you
no
say
worries.
it?
I would say Jocelyn Blaireau, but then again, I am French, so it's easier for me.
Yeah, perfect. I'm so glad that you could join us and also to hear your perspective on circular economy, status, trends, positive examples and contribution also to the economic recovery. So please, Jocelyn.
Thank you very much, Nina, and thank you for having me this morning. It's always a pleasure to talk to my Nordic friends, and I'm always reminded that the very first forays into circular economy when it comes to governmental experiences has come from the Nordics, and I spent a lot of the early days of the foundation actually visiting the Nordics. I see some friends online. I'm reminded of CradleNet and Elin, but also the Danish Business Authority, Business Sweden, Business Finland, and of course Citra, and all of this really is a testament to the work that has been done in the region. Now, if we do a bit of a flashback to where we were just 10 years ago, the European Commission's resource efficiency platform, presided over by Commissioner Potočnik at the time, came up with the very first circular economy manifesto, saying that Europe had no choice but to move towards a resource efficient and ultimately circular economy. And there are good reasons for that, of course. It's a region which is rich in terms of infrastructure and advanced manufacturing processes, but quite poor in terms of the access to raw materials. And also, crucially, when you look at the difference between Europe and some of other countries like countries in North America, the land space that we can use in order to bury the stuff and pretend we forget about the waste is actually not available. So there was a lot of pressure as well, and Europe wanted to hedge itself from the necessary imports of raw materials, whose volatility in terms of price and price increases as well was very high in the early 2010s. So, as Terry reminded us, circular economy rests on three principles. The first one is to eliminate waste and pollution. The second one is to keep materials in use. And the third one, which is absolutely crucial and still not very well understood or implemented, is the regenerative imperative when it comes to natural capital. Can we have an economy that is nature positive? And we need to really look at this in a matter of urgency. In other terms, if we can translate those principles, I think it's sometimes useful to look at it from the perspective of feedstock. First principle is what we put on the market, what we allow on the market, both in terms of volume and in terms of nature as well. So nature, I mean the composition of the product. So do we eliminate toxicity enough? Do we really know what is in the products that we put on the market? Are they fit for circularity? And I'll remind us that actually the 2020 Circular Economy Action Plan adopted by the European Commission has a subtitle that says, "For a clean and competitive Europe." And the emphasis is on both terms, because you cannot put stuff on the market that is not fit for circularity, or you run the risk of compounding the toxicity and turning the whole economy into a great downcycling machine as opposed to a recycling one. Now, if we look at the second principle, we could construe that keeping materials and products in use has a lot to do with process. It's about how we make those products as well. Are they fit to be refurbished? Can they be repurposed? Can the components be accessed? So it does include the design aspect, and of course design is a topic that is very close to the heart of the Nordic economy. You've been leading on functionality, leading on the simplicity and the actual modesty and the noble sense of the term of some of the designs that come out of the industry. And this is really important because complexity is actually also in some cases hindering the circularity potential, simply because we don't know what's in a product, we can't take them apart, and the only way to dispose of them is to shred and recover sometimes less than 5% of the actual material value. Which also means, and I'll move on to business models because this is at the heart of this webinar, that ideas such as giving access to the service over ownership, the functional economy, the performance economy, is often spoken about, but actually, is it really out there? Is it really available yet? No, we talk about those models as if they were the solution, but actually, the economic incentives are not there. In most cases, they're not practical, they're niche, they're far and few between, and the acceleration of those business models needs to be accompanied by some serious fiscal measures and also real incentives, which means also it's an investment story because we need the infrastructure for reverse logistics. And as Terry was saying extremely sharply, we haven't dared to look at some of the fundamental economic reforms that are necessary. If we do not do this, we end up running the risk of having pockets of circularity that are grafted onto an otherwise unchallenged linear model. And that really is, I think, one of the crux of the questions that we're facing right now, because it would, of course, as we know, be a mistake just to look at circular economy in terms of materials management only. It is a system change agenda, and it does provide solutions for the three major global crises that we face. Let's take climate, for instance. Climate and the circular economy was at the heart of the World Circular Economy Forum in 2021, an initiative that we owe to Citra and to which the Foundation is very happy to have been a partner since the first edition. And if we look at climate, we published a report in 2019, basically saying that 55% of GHG emissions come from the energy systems. The rest, the 45%, are from the products that we make and use, and that includes the food. And by the way, those figures have been calculated by a Swedish consultancy called Material Economics. So, you know, we always go back to the Nordics in this circular economy sphere. Now, so it means the material side of the economy is absolutely crucial. And if we apply circular economy levers in terms of design, but also repurposing and recycling at high quality to steel, cement, aluminium, plastics and food, we could be removing half of those 45% by 2050, which would be equivalent to taking all of the emissions of the current transport systems out of the equation. That's 9.3 billion ton according to Material Economics. And this is massive. So yes, the circular economy is a force for climate as well, absolutely. And it really is important to focus on this because the material flows on which we depend, we can decarbonize some of it, we can decarbonize the transport of it, but we won't get there unless we tackle consumption and production, so SDG 12. We could also look at the contribution that circular economy makes when it comes to biodiversity. And if we go back to the three principles, if we eliminate waste and pollution, that means we reduce the threats to biodiversity. And if we keep products and materials in use, we leave room for that biodiversity. We don't need to extract as much simply because what we don't waste, we don't need to replace. And that's pretty straightforward. That's pure question of quantities. Now, if we want to regenerate natural systems, that is a way of saying we want biodiversity to thrive. We want the ecosystem services to be healthy. And that goes back to Terry's point as well. We need to be able to really put a price on the environmental impact of the economy and make sure that these are reflected, because otherwise what we do not value enough, we end up wasting. And that's a major problem. Now, I've mentioned the three crises and I've alluded to climate, biodiversity. Let's look at pollution now. And that goes back to that notion of feedstock. What is allowed on the market? Do we have the right materials that are fit for circularity? If we look at the international landscape, we've seen last year the resolution that was adopted at UNEA 5.2 on the need for a legally binding instrument to tackle the plastic pollution crisis, which, by the way, is an iconically linear product that tends to stay in the system much more than it is welcome. And we've created huge volumes, and the volumes are rising every year. Now, circular economy here, in the context of the Plastics Treaty, is one part of the solution, and I'm not pretending that everything hinges on it. But the Ministerial Declaration of 2022, looking at the specifics of what the instrument should be tackling, does state that the linear economy is the root cause of the problem, and that's explicit in the text, which is a really interesting way of putting it, because we know now that circular economy has a massively important role to play when it comes to SDG 12, which we knew, but if we put it specifically in one sector to tackle one very concrete crisis, then it becomes more evident what needs to happen. The activity in general on the international stage is growing. We see a multiplication of national roadmaps, and Finland was the first one, of course, in 2016, but I've taken personally part in the development of the French one, which was adopted in 2019. There are scattered bits of activity around the globe, and it's not only in Europe. Actually, Chile has a national roadmap, which is turning into legislation at the moment. Circular economy has been in Chinese legislation since 2008, and they're moving away from their downstream interpretation of the concept and moving to things like eco-design, EPR, so moving upstream, going in the right direction. The China-EU dialogue on circular economy is very active as well. We've seen progress when it comes to the G7 and the G20. The declarations and the final communiques mention circular economy more and more. There's still a lot of work to be done in order to tackle the granularity and the implementation, but at least the topic is on the table. We have Latin America with a coalition of national governments. We have the African Circular Economy Alliance. We have seen the topic of circular economy become global and insert itself into the discussion at World Trade Organization level. There's an informal dialogue on plastics specifically as well that looks at that. And it is the sign that circular economy, which perhaps in some regions and some countries started off as a way to relocalize the economy, if it's going to get to scale, it is going to affect global material flows as we know them, which is very important. And as governments take up the topic, it's important for them to know where to start as well. This is why the foundation, we created the policy goals. We call them the universal policy goals, which is a bit pompous, but the idea is to say they can apply to a variety of geographies and economic conditions. So it's there for everyone to take. Just to say, this is not a recipe book that will give you a step-by-step way of creating a roadmap, but if you're thinking about this as a government or as a business authority, if you really want to focus the conversation and make sure that there's a commonality of direction, we need to first look at stimulating design for the circular economy. It's what criteria, what do we mandate, what do we accept, what don't we accept? Then the second one is manage resources to preserve value. So getting out of the mindset of waste management and dealing in the best way possible with things which are suboptimal, but really looking at from the very outset, how do we keep those materials flowing? How do we preserve their value? And that could be through investment in infrastructure, but also repurposing remanufacturing facilities and potentially tax breaks for remanufacturing or repair activities. We also need to make the economic work, and that really goes back to what Terry was saying, so I won't dwell on this too much, but it is the profound economic reforms that are necessary. Do we really believe that we're going to get to circular economy if we don't challenge the fact that the current models are hardwired for and by linearity, and all the incentives go one way? There is a need, and that's the fourth goal, to invest in innovation, material innovation, skills as well, materials management, but also business model development. And I know this is going to be at the heart of the seminar. And finally, the fifth goal, which is really a replication of SDG 17, is the collaboration for system change. It needs all actors, it's a co-creation process, and it can't be imposed by decree. So the circular economy will only happen if there is an acceptance that this is a desirable end state and everybody needs to pull in the same direction, because the economy thrives, everybody benefits, society and the environment as well. But that needs to be really understood by all actors. So it's a whole of government agenda, and it entails reform. And this is where I want to leave the audience with today. It can sometimes feel, and we celebrate the circular economy progress on the global stage because it's there, because it is in the public sphere and it is talked about. It can feel sometimes that now we're facing a very simple choice of, do we carry on with linearity or do we go for circular, as if the weight was the same on both sides of the equation, where it would probably be naive and a big mistake to think like that, because a lot of the costs and the incentive structure of the economy has to be modified in order for circular economy to get to scale. We can achieve pockets of circularity, but that won't be enough. And it really about the way that we envisage value creation. And the urgency is to move from a model that destroys and depletes and consumes to one that builds economic, social, and natural capital. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. I have some questions for you. This was really great, and it was great to hear that you started out with Commissioner Potočnik, but really put circularity on the agenda and resource efficiency. And I've heard him recently to talk about circularity, and he's still really, really important voice. I just want to ask you, due to the climate transformation, we need all this renewable, and we're going towards an electrical vehicle fleet. So what risks do you see with the climate transformation connected to new raw materials?
Well, that's a very interesting case in point, because actually with this question, we're exactly at the nexus between energy systems and materials. So we need that in order to decarbonize. So I mentioned the 55% of the emissions that come from energy systems. In order to decarbonize this and reduce that figure, we will need to have a profound hardware transformation, which means that there's a material impact, which also has a climate impact. So in order to get to this, there are big questions. First, we know that the availability of those raw materials is very limited. They're not evenly distributed geographically, so that leads to geopolitical tensions as well. And what we see emerge is the reality of a hardcore economic situation where you have the Chinese infrastructure when it comes to battery recycling. We see that Europe is forging ahead with the Circular Battery Alliance as well, which in a way reveals that yes, there is a common direction to go towards low carbon systems, but that does create geopolitical tensions. And that means it needs to be managed very carefully, because it's fine to have various poles of attraction and various recycling, refurbishing, processing centers around the world, but they need to be distributed and they need to be close to where the use is, because it doesn't really make sense then to have those centers completely far apart, and then you end up negating the benefits by simply having more transport. And it's also simply a question of economic sovereignty. So we have to be realistic about this, and it needs an international dialogue again in order to get to scale. We can't go back to thinking that we can solve this in our own corners of the world. Those material flows are global. The incentives and the value chains that have been created around them are global, and there's a lot of vested interest, and we need to have an open discussion about this.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. Sorry for pronouncing your name probably very wrong, Blaireau. So it was really I'm so glad that you could join us, and this was really a super interesting perspective. Thank you so much, Jocelyn. So let's move on. Thank you. Let's move on. And I want to ask my colleague to come up here, Malin Redmo, and we will present the report that we have on the agenda today. Also, we started out, we have this report, Circular Business Models, and you can find it on the Haga Initiative's webpage. And as I mentioned before, it's financed by Nordic Council of Ministers, and also this report we have in a collaboration with our Norwegian and Finnish partners. So we wanted to examine the Nordic countries' policies on circular economy and also share best practices. And also showcase frontrunners within business, both SMEs and also large companies, to inspire more companies to become circular.
Yes, so the current economic system, characterized by a linear approach to consumption and production, implies a strong correlation between income and material consumption. Business as usual will lead to a rapid increase in material extraction. As the image here displays, the global use of resources has tripled since 1970s, and in a scenario of business as usual, the use of resources is expected to almost double between today and 2050, while annual waste generation is predicted to increase by 70% during the same period. Today, almost half of the world's total greenhouse gas emissions are estimated to come from the use of land and the production of materials and products. In addition, the use of resources is responsible for more than 90% of biodiversity loss. Circular economy has a large potential for minimizing many of these risks, as it offers an attractive response to the challenge of reducing the environmental impact associated with material use, while supporting further improvements in standards of living. The circular economy offers opportunities to reinvent the economy and can contribute to several economic benefits, such as more innovative and efficient ways of producing and consuming, opportunities for local jobs and social integration, and protection for businesses against scarcity of resources and volatile prices. This new geopolitical reality implies tensions caused by conflicts, increased competition, and climate change. Circular economy can be a key enabler of resilience and lower dependency on global supply chains that are easily disrupted during geopolitical crisis. One example is the current energy crisis in Europe, which is driven by dependence on imports of Russian natural gas. Today, the extraction and processing of many critical materials is concentrated to a few countries, such as Brazil, Russia, China, and South Africa. This presents a real economic and political risk for the EU and for the Nordic countries. Securing a reliable supply of raw materials, but also of food, energy, and other important products, will be critical to growth and sustainable development. Reducing demand for virgin materials by enabling circular solutions can be an important part of the solution. With the current patterns of material use, the global demand for key materials will increase 2- to 4-fold. Raw materials and critical minerals, crucial to feed the green transition, is expected to increase dramatically during the coming decades, and the supply from virgin resources will not be able to grow as fast. Access to these materials will therefore grow in importance and become a key geopolitical factor.
So, in this report, we can see that the Nordic countries share many significant similarities. The economies are open, the level of international trade is high, national resources play a significant role in industry and export, and their overall social structure among the countries is similar. The Nordic countries also have a long history of ambitious environmental and climate policies. In the early 90s, Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden were the first countries in the world to introduce a carbon tax, followed by Iceland. And according to OECD, Environmental Countries Review on the Nordic region scores high on most environmental quality indicators. Though, looking closely at how Nordic countries perform on circularity, the image, however, becomes bleaker. It is difficult to compare different countries in terms of their circularity performance statistically due to lack of data and differences in reporting procedures. Remember that. However, the available data suggests that the Nordic countries generally performs poorly compared to EU and global average. And please find the statistics in the report. So don't shoot the messenger, we're just reporting what the statistics says. So, improved circularity could reduce carbon emissions by 10 to 20 million tons in the Nordics by 2050. So, there is a large untapped potential for the Nordic region to take the lead in global circularity transition. There are many positive examples and promising circular business models in the Nordic region. So in this report, we have focused on 3 areas where Nordic businesses, frontrunners, have shown that circular business models can work and that they can deliver multiple benefits to all sectors of society. And that is food production, that is rare earth elements, metals and raw materials, and heat and renewable energy. And here you can see a picture from the Swedish Climate Policy Council. And we can see that just working with collaboration, with good examples, we can see that we can strengthen and accelerate the circular transition. And as we can see, we have done land studies in the report from the different Nordic countries, and we can learn so much from each other. We just heard a perspective from Finland, from Terry Lehtonen, and it's just so much we can learn from Finland and from other countries that we can see in the report. So please read the report, because I won't go through all the positive and learning experience from the different countries. Behind this report, there is a long dialogue that we have had with business, with researchers, with authorities, and that together with the first report, with the study we did with the 40 CEOs in the Nordics, that give us this picture of what we need to do. So, first, we need a common Nordic circular economy strategy focusing on high potential solutions and critical value chain. And we can see that if deepen Nordic cooperation can speed up circular economy transition, and it also can then unlock multiple benefits. And we can also see in this report that we have 4 areas where it can play an important role. And many, looking at the exchange experience on circular economy and a tax reform, we can see that getting the price right and getting a leveling playing field between linear and circular business models will be critical. And we heard both that from Terry and from Jocelyn. That's critical for the circular transition. We need to get the price right. And the Nordic countries can also work closer together to share experiences and best practices on circular economic tax reform. And thereby, we're also creating a larger market for Nordic circular solutions. Looking at exchange experience and harmonized standards, definition and access to data, we can see that regulatory lock-in effects and conflicts also present a major obstacle to circular business models. So we need to create a larger market and greater opportunities for economies of scale. And last, knowledge transfer and learning from the frontrunners. We will soon hear a perspective from business, but we have different strengths and weaknesses in the Nordic region and looking at circular economy. But a significant improvement can likely be achieved by learning from best practices, as well as more coherent implementation of EU regulation. So lessons from Nordic countries can really be valuable. So this is our report, and you can find it on the webpage. And we really hope that the Nordic countries, all of them, can take this a step further. So thank you, Malin.
Thank you.
And let's move on to listen and discuss with our politicians. And I want to present Janine Alm Eriksson, who is the member of the Swedish Parliament from the Swedish Green Party, and also Jytte Guteland, who is the member of the Swedish Parliament and from Social Democratic Party, and Jytte recently was a member of the European Parliament, and also Jessica Polfjärd, who is a member of the European Parliament from the Moderate Party. So, hi. Hi, Janine.
Hi. Hi.
Hi, Jytte.
Hi.
Hi, Jessica.
Hello.
Hello. Great to see you all. So, first, maybe I should ask Janine, what is your response on what we've heard so far in the report?
Well, that it's a very good report that ties a few things together that really need to be on the table before when we continue to work with this very important area, because knowledge and learning from each other and see where the gaps are is a very important thing, of course, in this, because everything is going a bit too slow. And of course, that is because not everyone supports the change so far. And for all the knowledge that can be put in is an important thing, since the circular economy is really our way to a sustainable future. There has to be a prosperous economy, and this is our way to combine this.
Thank you. And Jytte, what is your reflection so far?
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to listen to the panelists and take part of this discussion. I must say also that I find it very important and timely, and I'm grateful for the report and also for the initiative from you to have this discussion. I would say in one way, I'm a little bit shocked that the Nordic countries are not in the leading position when you really dive into it. So that is something to really take back to the Parliament and discuss how we could do more to take that leadership. But there is also, I mean, not a big surprise that the circular economy and all the opportunities that it creates are not yet there in the political discussion, at least not on the national level. Because I remember being an MEP that it was a big difference, actually, when I came from Sweden and the political debates back home, and then moved myself and my brain to the European Parliament and listened to the discussions there, that the circular economy was much more present in the debate. And that is maybe the answer to why you have these findings in the report, that we are not in the ship here. I see that there are many obstacles today, and I think they have been presented, but like market problems, the situation what we have with virgin materials being more cheap than to use used materials. And also the systematic approach we heard from Terry. So there are many things that has been said, but I also think that there are some maybe technical hinders. Maybe I missed it, but I don't think that has been highlighted so much. That they are not as problematic as there were maybe 20 years back, but I think that sometimes it is about that the different businesses doesn't know how to use and reuse material in a good way. So there are still some technical hinders. I think they will be less of them if this circular economy was more on the political agenda all the time. Then I think that would push also the industry to do more here.
So let's come back to the political perspective just in a few seconds. I just want to let Jessica Polfjärd to have her perspective so far. So what have you brought with you from the report and from the discussion and the keynotes?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation and for having this webinar. It's of course very important and timely discussion that we're having, and I would also like the Haga Initiative for have stayed on message for so long time, and I can see that I guess that the discussion today is different what it was when you started, and maybe there are more interest in these questions and issues at the time. And I think both the keynote speakers and the presentation of the report was very interesting. I can see that there are a lot of focus around, for example, the raw materials, but I will also say that is a freeze from today, that we are seeing innovation and research all the time. What is the complement for raw materials in the future, and what is the possibilities? And we can also see a finding, for example, in Sweden recently. It is interesting to have the Nordic markets as the baseline, and I think that Nordic cooperation is always good, and that we can be the front runners and we can be a way forward, because we have similarities was also pointed out in the presentation, that we have similar systems and also all materials and for being exporting countries. But I think also that it's a risk that we have a fragmented market, because we do want a single market that is not fragmented. And what we can see and try to avoid in the EU legislation is that we're having a fragmented market, and I think that is a very important perspective from EU legislation, to keep in mind that we do have this as a legal base as well. But I will stop there, and I guess we will come back to more questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Jessica. And I have to start with you, Jessica, and ask you that same question that I asked Terry in Finland also. Why is it going so slowly to get to a circular economy? What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, I'm sure that we can move faster, and I'm sure that there is a demand from consumers that we will move faster. But I think it's also important to give the time to industry who are doing the transition, a certain amount of time to doing the transition that we ask for. And we can see that there is a lot of legislation going on. And I think that maybe what Jytte was referring to, that maybe I'm a bit I don't know the English word, but blind at home from the parliament, because we do discuss this a lot. We have delivered on the Fit for 55 package, and now we are moving on with the circular economy agenda, and therefore maybe we have this on top of mind and on the top of the agenda. So I can see that we are moving forward. We are doing and taking steps toward a more sustainable and circular economy. And now we are having a lot of legislation in front of us. But I can also see the industry side, where we can see every day we are given examples of how we are seeing development and from all different areas, from fertilizers to textiles, where we can see new innovation, new circularity models, and we can also see benefits and cooperation between different areas where we haven't seen cooperations before. And I think that is also important. But I think that what you have also said, that there's been a development just during the time that this mandate has been going on since 2019. That we can see a broader discussion and a better understanding, both from legislation and from industry.
Thank you, Jessica. And you started out saying that industry needs time. So let's move over to Janine Alm Eriksson. What is your perspective? Why does it go so slowly with circular economy? Do you think it goes too slowly first?
Yes, I certainly think it goes all too slowly, as I said in the beginning, because this is a really important transition to come to a sustainable future. And that has to be on the bottom line of every discussion about this. But, and I think that, yes, we have to give industry time, of course. That we do by putting up goals that is time set and everyone knows what is expected. That has been shown to be a very successful way to work towards change. I think one of the things that is really lacking is political will. Because we try to put forward examples of policy that can be implemented. And many of the political parties still say no, because they think other things in this very big and complex equation is more important. And that is why we don't see all the, because since it's complex, since it's about so many different areas of society that has to now click, like legislation of cost benefits, of behavior, collaboration. Of course, national politics has to take a bigger responsibility, and even better if we can do it in a Nordic context, of course, and do it together, because that will build a lot of strength. I was also a bit, well, maybe not shocked, but disappointed that the Nordic countries are not taking the leadership in this question and moving forward faster, because we really have the ability. We have knowledge, we are rich countries, we can afford to try and also in some ways error and to learn for others to follow. But so I think that we really have to go back to our parties and see what can be done. I know you, Nina, talked about tax reform, for example, and that is a very good example, because here next week there will be a tax reform passed in the parliament, and that is about raising taxes on reparations of shoes, bicycles, clothes, and so on. So here the government is moving in the wrong direction, unfortunately, right now. And so every time we can highlight the importance of circular economy and work together on improving it, I think that is a very important thing. Then, of course, it's different in different sectors. And so here, when we talk about the circular economy, it's on a very broad overall kind of way. But then it's also very important to go down to the nitty-gritty and see what has to be done in all the different sectors of society.
Thank you, Janine. Then we have the perspective of time for industry and political will is lacking. Jytte, do you agree with them, with Janine and Jessica? Why is the circular economy going so slowly?
I definitely agree with many of the things that has been said. I think, as I mentioned, that these four obstacles or barriers, that's technical, market hinder, institutional hinder, and then also the cultural hinder is a good explanation. But I also find that all of these could go faster and be solved faster if there was a political will to put the circular economy on top of the political agenda. And maybe, I mean, when you ask why isn't it on the political agenda, maybe it is for the same reason that climate is not on the agenda the way it maybe was 2019 on the election to the European Parliament. There it was on the agenda, and after Greta Thunberg and all these IPCC reports, I think it was on the agenda. But now there has been a couple of years where it has been put down on the agenda, and I think that can explain a little bit of it. With the war, of course, that should, as been said also in the presentation, be a motivator that we need a more circular economy. But unfortunately, no, that's not the case when you listen to the political debates today. So there are some explanations. But then also, if you look at the Nordic countries and Sweden in particular, compared to the European EU level, not only the parliament, but the whole EU level, I find it a little bit more surprising that we are not being that front runners that we could be when you look at our history of taking a greater environmental responsibility. And also, if you look at the economic situation for the Nordic countries, we should be the front runners. And I also, if you look at political changes or big shifts these years that we have behind us, I think that the European Green Deal, the climate law, the EU climate law, and the Fit for 55 package is it's really leading the climate legislation. It's the driver in also for Sweden. And also in circular economy, the EU is leading. But if you look at the climate law that I have experienced since I was the rapporteur in the European Parliament, I think we had a very good situation since we could look at Sweden, for example, and take inspiration from what has been done on the national level. And I think the EU today cannot take the same inspiration from Sweden, if I look at my own country, when it comes to circular economy. So I think we really need to reflect on that, because many times it's good for the EU level to have different front runners among the member states. If you don't have that, it's not as easy to really take the necessary leadership. So I think that's something we should reflect on. Why are we not there? Why are we not helping the EU level? Because I really find that the EU level probably is the most efficient level to do many of this, since we are having the trade and we have the internal market. We need to do it on the EU level. Many of these circularity needs to be done on the EU level, but still we need member states to be front runners.
So what you do, if you look at the policy instruments, if you would say, Jytte, 3 important policy instruments that you think would be very, very effective to accelerate the circular transition, which 3 policy instruments is that?
But I think that also that has been said in the introduction a lot. Of course, we need the economic incentives, so make it more expensive to use the virgin materials is probably a very important key here. Otherwise, it will be the most easy way for the industry to go on. And I think we need to make the balance more in advantage for to reuse and have a more circular economy. And then I also think, of course, we need also to find ways to connect the best examples with other best examples in the European level, on the European level. If we have, I mean, I was at this textile industry that is using all jeans to create new material from the old jeans to create new ones, resell, and they are extremely advanced. And I think many times these new innovative industries, they need also some help on their way to kind of both have the infrastructure needed. They need also to be helped in their like best examples on the EU level, helping these companies to really advance. And then
which is the last one, so we can move on.
Yeah, sorry. Maybe I was a little bit too long then. I would also say that these putting it more in the political agenda is actually a political tool also, because I think that that would also help many industries.
Yeah. Thank you, Jytte. And let's move over to the European Parliament and to Jessica. So what's top 3? Do you have top 3 policy instruments that you would like to see?
I don't know really if you're asking for concrete legislation or more an overall view on this, but I can start with the overall. And I think that what is important now is that we have a clear framework, that we have a level playing field, and that we don't have targets or goals that will hinder the innovation. Like you mentioned in the beginning, Nina, you talked about the lack of raw materials. And I think that is a good example from when we had the negotiations of the batteries legislation, for example, that setting targets could hinder the innovation, because we know that there is not enough of recycled content, which could have the opposite effect that we really wanted it to have. And I think what you also spoke about in presenting the report, for having the possibility to have the benchmark and to have a good exchange of good practices is also important. And I think that, of course, the economic incentives is of key. And therefore, I think it's important as a legislator to have this on top of mind. And also, like I said in the beginning, have sufficient time for the transition for those who are doing the transition, the industry, and therefore, but don't have less ambitions in that regard. But if I look at what we have on the agenda here in the Parliament, to be concrete, I would say that we have had the batteries legislation, which was the first legislation coming from the new circular agenda, and we have eco-design, how products will last longer, repairability, and so on. And we also have a legislation coming on packaging. So I think from a Swedish context and from the circular agenda, I think this will be helpful in the future.
Thank you, and thank you for your concrete also. Janine, let's move over to you. What kind of 3 policy instruments is important?
Well, of course, as Jytte developed a bit, is the economic incentives. We have to make the business models be working for not using the raw materials, but the reused ones. And but also in other areas in this, that you do not just have to produce, sell, and then things are thrown away, but also renting and lending and all those things. To make new business models work here, I think it's a bit, everyone needs to help here. The producers and the business has to do their part. The investors in new technologies and new business models has to be there and be brave. But also the consumers have to be ready to adopt another way of looking at things that you buy or lend or or so. And that is a slow revelation, I think, but it's moving in the right direction. But except for the economic incentives, of course, I think research and development is also very important. Here on the climate side, we've had Industriklivet that has promotes new techniques to reduce carbon emissions, for example, and we need to find a working solution that is quite similar. And I believe in clear quantitative goals because if we put them up, everyone knows it's like the Paris Agreement. We know that we have to reduce emissions, but we also have to have the goals here in the circular economy in order to get everyone to know what to work for, and being that also creates a bit of competitiveness, and that is usually also good to develop an area that is underdeveloped.
I just wonder, Jessica and Janine and Jytte, do you feel the pressure from industry and business that circular economy is important? I just want a short answer. Do you feel the pressure, or do you want higher pressure from them? Have you felt the pressure so far? I think Jytte can start, and then Jessica, and then Janine. Short answers, please.
You still see me? Yeah, you see me. Okay.
We can hear you, Jytte.
Yes.
I can't see you. Now you're back.
Okay. I feel the pressure, but I think it could be higher.
Perfect. Jessica?
I see a demand from industry that they want politics to run faster. So I think that is a clear message from industry.
Perfect. And Janine?
I see it from some areas, but not all. So we all have to get our hands on deck and work more together to see, also make the other areas see that they have to work with this.
I just want to thank you. It was so fruitful to hear the discussion and to hear your perspective. A big thank you to Jessica in Brussels maybe, and Jytte and Janine from the Swedish Parliament. Thank you so much. Really interesting to hear your perspective. And also, please help us spread this report, because this is a push from industry, and we have interviewed so many companies. This is more than the Haga Initiative. This is a cry out from the Nordic big businesses that really want to step up circular economy. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, thank you. So let's move on to business dialogue. Scalable solution, possibilities and opportunities. So I would like to see Claes Johansson from Lantmännen. And hi, Claes. Hi, Claes. Yes, you have to put the sound on. All of you have to put the sound on. And also Sara Davidsson from Stena Recycling. Hi.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. And Åsa Domey from Axfood. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, it works. And David O'Brock from Retech.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Claes Johansson again. Lantmännen.
Yeah, good morning. Hopefully
It
I'm
works.
successful now.
And finally, Göran Nyström from Ovako Group.
Hello, everybody. Good morning.
It works fantastic, and we can hear you. That's really, really great. In the report, we are talking about 3 areas that we think is really, really important. It's food and energy and bioenergy and minerals and rare earth minerals and so. And you represent these kind of areas, and we're so glad that you could join us. And I just want to start out with you and just give us the inspiration, Claes, representing the farmers in Lantmännen. Your best example, agroethanol. So why is it circular, and is it? Can you please tell us about it?
Yes, thank you, Nina. And I mean, first of all, circular thinking is a kind of precondition to be successful, to drive a agri-cooperative working in the full value chain from field to fork. I think that's we are very well integrated between the food, the feed, and the fuel value chains, and we also see potentials to also be more circular when it comes to fertilizers. But the example you mentioned, agroethanol, it's actually a biorefinery where we bring in raw materials in terms of around 600,000 tons of ethanol grain every year, and also in an increasing level of residues, around 50,000 tons of residues from the food value chain. And from that we refine different products and scale the value of them. So we get out some 230 million tons of biofuels with a climate reduction potential of 98% compared to gasoline. We take out some 200,000 tons of protein, today mainly used as feed and replacing imported soy. So that's also a quite significant volumes, and that fraction, the protein fraction, we are also investing now some 800 millions in a new technology where we can also take out the proteins and make proteins for food, for human consumption. So we are investing quite heavily to all the time upgrade these value streams. And we also take care of the CO2, the green, the biogenic CO2 from these processes, and produce some carbon acids from it, and that is used also in many applications in the food industry. So I think this is a good example of how you can take the grain, take the residues, and make the most out of it, and all the time try to invest and upgrade the value from these streams. I think this is what circular economy is about in concrete terms. I can also mention our next investments in the size of 1 billion Swedish krona, around 100,000 euro. It's a pea protein facility in center of Sweden, where we are going to process pea proteins, and with the same logics as we, of course, the food proteins is a key component, but we also need to take care of the residues in terms of energy and feed, and also in the next step fertilizers back to the soil. So I think many of our major investments, the investments I'm talking about here is, I mean, in a 10 years perspective, it's definitely on the top 5 in terms of size when it comes to investments in the Lantmännen systems. Is happening right now, and it's already very much based on this circular thinking.
Claes?
So I think this
can you hear me?
Is a few examples of how we think and work with circular economy in quite concrete terms.
Claes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. I just wonder. Oh, sorry, I lost you. I just wonder, that means that all the rest products in agroethanol is used, or is it any rest products left that you need to handle to get it more circular?
No, I think we utilize them all, but of course it's as I mentioned, it's always a question of how you can utilize them on the higher level. So that's why we do this investment in taking out the feed proteins and utilize them into the food, since the food proteins have a higher value. So that's a big investment we do now. So I think it's more about that upgrading.
And just a short, is it scalable for other companies to do the same journey with their agroethanol as you have done?
Yeah, I mean, if they have an agroethanol, I think it's definitely possible. But in Sweden, we are quite unique with this kind of facilities. But of course, it's available technology, and we do it on 100% commercial conditions. So from that perspective, it's scalable.
Thank you. So let's move over to Sara Davidsson from Stena Recycling. So your best example, Sara.
Yes, I will give you a good example. So our core, just to understand Stena Recycling, you can hear from the name that our core business is secondary resources, what other companies or society regards as waste, we regard as valuable resources. So one example I think will be very clear from a geopolitical point of view, which is kind of the base for today's webinar, that we are investing in a battery center in Halmstad on the west coast of Sweden. And this battery center will prolong the lifetime of batteries, and I will get to that in a while, but also keep valuable resources in the region and for more production and more energy storage capabilities. And you can see the new battery center in the picture right behind me, and we are opening it in March this year. So it's as Claes mentioned, it's a concrete investment and things we're doing to enhance circular economy. And this investment is also supported by politics, because we have battery regulation from the European Union, sort of policy making and regulating how we should take care of resources in a better way, and not in a linear and the old-fashioned way. So this is a good example also of how industry and energy transition and politics is moving hand in hand. I would also say that the location in Halmstad is perfect, because it's in the middle of the Nordic region, so to say. If you look at Halmstad on the map, you will find that it's surrounded by water, and we have an ability to move transport via vessel and railway from all of the other countries around us.
And so, of course, this solution is also scalable and possible for others to use.
The solution as such is, I mean, it's unique for battery recovery, but the idea as such as in prolonging the lifetime of valuable resources and providing for sort of a circular perspective on resource use, that is for sure scalable.
Thank you.
If there is time, I would like to mention also battery loop, because
just short, very short.
Okay, because many of the batteries that we take into the battery center, I mean, there's a big possibility to repurpose them, and this is a good example, I think, of a circular business model, which is also the baseline of this webinar. Because a lot of batteries that cannot be used in vehicles anymore, they have a lot of potential to be repurposed, for example, as energy storage in facilities.
Thank you so much, Sara. So let's move over to David O'Brock from Retech. So
hello. So go ahead.
No, I asked, please tell me short about your company and your solution.
So basically, Retech has developed a way of separating the rare earths from each other. These are the lanthanides down on your periodic table that nobody ever thinks about, but we use them every single day. And in part of the development, we've understood that we need to be able to reuse as much of things like heat, water, processed chemicals as possible to lower the CO2 impact or the environmental impact. And at the same time, we developed the technology to not only take in primary materials, but be able to take in and not only end-of-life materials. So, for example, Stena could send us processed magnets, and we could process that out and make virgin materials again that would be suitable for the magnet industry. But also, if we're talking about a circular production, one thing is that today these minerals come in all different kinds of shapes and sizes, and normally when the factories are built, they're built for one specific type of mineral. Our flexibility of our factory allows mine resources to be used more fully and more responsibly, meaning that it comes as a secondary resource, for example, iron mining. That rare earth containing part of that may not be to a standard that the rest of the world wants to use. Our technology allows that to come in and be reused. And the fact that our old and new investors have, they've been convinced that this is a scalable, long-term sustainable solution that we can continue to develop, and it's been transformative for us.
Fantastic. And of course, this must be scalable as well for others to use?
It is scalable as well. It's our thought is that the closer to the source, the better.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Interesting to hear. So let's move over to Göran Nyström at Ovako Group. Please tell us short about Ovako and also what you are doing.
Yeah, there's so many things we are doing, but we are, maybe a little known fact is that we are the largest recycler of Nordic scrap, all categories actually. So it's
and you work together closely with Stena Recycling as well.
Yes, Stena is our largest supplier of scrap, so we have a very close relation with Stena, of course. So we're closing the loop in the Nordics. And we're also a leader in carbon footprint, largely as a result of using scrap. So we have the lowest footprint in the world. And in fact, now we are also compensating. So we are 100% carbon neutral, first in the steel world to be that. So, but the ambitions are very high. In fact, we have the highest ambitions among all steel companies to reduce our carbon footprint. And by 2030, it shall be reduced by 80%, the little that remains. And the biggest thing for us is to introduce hydrogen for our heating of steel. And of course, producing hydrogen by electricity, preferable than by circular electricity. And this is a massive thing for us. So we have one project running, which is in Hofors. We will remove 20,000 tons of carbon dioxide there. And then we have also recently received the funding from Naturvårdsverket for Smedjebacken to build a similar solution there. So it's a massive thing. It goes for all steel heating operations anywhere in the world. Anybody could use this concept, and not only steel, actually, all high grade industrial heat. So it's very scalable.
Great. And I just wonder, how much scrap is it out there in the world?
So today, steel is about 28% based on scrap. Every year, scrap content in the world is growing. So over time, we could be using much more scrap in the, we look a century ahead, it could be all be scrap based if it wasn't for the fact that we unfortunately are mixing copper into our scrap content. So that's another project we're working on, how to actually remove copper from liquid steel. But in the meanwhile, we all actually need to contribute not to destroy our steel scrap in the world, because then it's not going to be possible to be fully circular.
Interesting. Thank you. And let's move over to Åsa Domey from Axfood. And short about your company, but mostly about your circular economy example, Åsa.
Yes, Axfood is a food retail company. So we have several food retail chains. And in the report, there is an example. It's an example with about soil reduction and food waste. Because in the research program, salmon were produced with insects instead of soy feedstuff, and the insects ate food waste. And now we're going into step 3 with continual production of salmon, so that we can sell it continuously in some Hemköp stores. So at the same time, it's climate smart, but also it's very good to reduce loss of biodiversity, because we reduce usage of soy from Brazil.
Fantastic. And I just want to, and is that scalable as well for others?
Yes, it's scalable. I mean, in this project, food waste is used as feedstuff for the insects. But it's also possible, probably, to use other resources than food waste, because there are many streams of waste in society that are not used.
I just want to say that I ask if it's scalable because I just want to make a case of that it's such a big potential. If everybody was doing what you were doing, it's such a big potential. We can reduce carbon emissions. We can go lower our impact on biodiversity and so. So it's so easy to it's just so important to say that it's scalable because it's a big potential, of course. I just want to ask you, I'll start with Åsa, just short, just your learning experience of doing this. Is it any obstacles that you want to share with us that other don't have to, that they can pass and don't have to do? What kind of hinders have you met by going towards more circularity in general in your company?
In general, not in this project, not in this.
No, in general, that we can learn.
In general, there are many different obstacles. I mean, if we look at circularity and challenges within food retail, we use a large amount of packaging. I mean, the plastic packaging we have, it's a much more climate impact than the fuel used for the trucks we have. And packaging, there are so many different kinds of plastics. It's so complicated. We don't produce anything at all. We buy food and we sell food. But nevertheless, we have a whole team working with packaging, development, and dialogue with our suppliers. And to get the right answers from suppliers about the exact packaging components, the exact structure, not only if the plastic is PE or PP, because they haven't got the knowledge many times because they are just fillers. And now we have created a database with 18,000 plastic components. And then we have all the chemicals. We're using the thin list as a tool, and it takes so much time because there are so many chemicals that shouldn't be allowed in consumer products, but they are allowed, and we're trying to phase out the chemicals that should be banned in the legislation. So this is just a few examples, and then many have spoken about economic incentives of different kinds, and of course that's important in general.
Yeah, thank you. Just so interested to hear the obstacles. Let's move over to David O'Brock from Retech. Any obstacles that you want to share, and anything that we can just learn from you in your journey?
Well, since we've heard already several times today that the energy transition still requires a greater amount of primary materials, that means that there still needs to be mining going on. And unfortunately, in the EU and in Nordic countries especially, to open up a new resource, it's very time consuming. So if we can get some kind of political understanding or help on providing those companies who are using a circular processing in their mining, meaning that they're having secondary products coming off of their mining. They're not only mining for one primary resource, that they can get their permits and things in a timely manner. Then of course this can only help to increase this transition to the circular production economy in this region.
Thank you. And Claes, för Lantmännen. So,
Yes,
any obstacles and
thank
any
you.
learning
I
lessons
think
for us?
the easy and the short answer is, of course, the biggest obstacle is the price of the alternatives, the low price of the linear flows. I can take an example of, if you talk about the fertilizer, I mentioned it before. We come from a very long period of cheap fertilizers based directly or indirectly on Russian natural gas, and since the Russian invasion of Ukraine almost a year ago, the price of natural gas has not been so cheap anymore, and in the next step, the price level of fertilizer have increased significantly, and that's in short term, of course, a big challenge. But in a little bit of a longer term, it's also open up for alternatives, and I think it's fair to say that during this year, more have happened around circular fertilizer solutions than in the last couple of 30 years. So I think you need
That's
always to
fantastic.
understand that it's always, if you don't come in with some political incentives or regulations, it's always about competition and the price level is, you need to see that in a long-term perspective, you can have a profitable business searching out for circular-based solutions that we all want. But in the end of the day, we need to have the financials in place, and I think the fertilizer example is a quite good one from that perspective.
Really a good example in this geopolitical context we are in right now. Thank you, Claes.
Yes.
And Göran, you mentioned copper before, and that was really, really important. Is it anything more you could share from Ovako and from the scrap industry, the lesson learned that you want to share, and obstacles that you have seen?
Well, I want to promote and push for this hydrogen for industrial heating. It was very fast to establish. We have taken no IP for it. When we make the calculations for the economy of it, we find that 2022, with the high electricity prices, is the best operational economy year. So the concept is very strong and applicable by others. And now that Naturvårdsverket is prepared to give funding, it applies to anybody that wants to apply this concept. And that means for many different points in Sweden, we could have this kind of CO2 saving, but also regulating ability to help to regulate frequency on the power grid. And it's been virtually no obstacles, very fast. From when this was first invented in 2019, we're going to be operating now, 2023.
Fantastic. Thank you, Göran. And let's move over to Sara at Stena Recycling. Anything you want to share? Obstacles that you have overwon and that you can see, want to share?
I can only enforce what the other speakers have said. We're sharing the same view on obstacles, looking from sort of society and onto our business and business models and business cases. Göran Nyström from Ovako and we at Stena Recycling, we have exactly the same point of view regarding the way that we blend materials in the linear business models. Åsa Domey at Axfood was saying the same thing, that we have too many different sort of plastics, too many complex materials in metals, and it's a hassle to sort it out when you're trying to recycle it. That's not the solution. We need to address the solution in a circular business model and looking at design and things like that. From our own internal point of view, I think it's a question of endurance and mindset. And focusing not only on being a sort of supplier of recycled material, but looking at ourselves as a center and a matchmaker in value networks, and not providing solutions, but like interacting in the networks like this Haga Initiative to find addressing the questions and finding the solutions together.
Thank you, Sarah. And just by being here, all your companies, saying what solutions you have, and sharing experience is so important, because I wanted to ask you a question about policy, but we don't have the time. So I will give you the time for around 10 seconds. So just what is the most crucial you need from policy? And you just have 10 seconds. So Göran.
We need to bring circular fossil-free electricity at low costs to the market.
Great. David?
I think I already said supporting for opening up new resources in the EU.
Great. Thank you. Claes?
An integrated view on the food, feed and fuel value chain and productions.
Sarah?
Clear end of waste directives in the Nordics and the whole of Europe.
Thank you. And Åsa? We can't hear you. You need to have the sound on.
In general, the right price incentives and more of chemical regulations. It's great with the PFAS initiative right now, for example.
So thank you, Claes, Sara, Åsa, David, and Göran for bringing your perspective, sharing a good example, and also giving your perspective on what we need from policy. A big thank you to you. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's move on to our last panel. And I want to present Elin Bergman from COO of CradleNet, and also Ann-Charlotte Mellqvist from RISE.
Thank you.
So, hi Elin.
Hi.
I can't see you, but I can hear you. And also Ann-Charlotte Mellqvist from RISE. Are you with us?
Good morning. Yes.
So, let's start with Ann-Charlotte. What is your response to the conversations we heard so far? Just top of your heart or mind.
Very interesting. Thank you for having me here. I'm a researcher, so that's, I guess, the reason why I have this, why I'm here. I think that the discussions have been very interesting, and I think that this report fills a gap, because I think that the Nordic level has been a bit sort of overlooked earlier in the circular economy discourse. So we talk a lot about EU, of course, and also about the national level and below that. But the Nordic level has been a bit left out. So I think that's really good. I think that one thing that come out for me is that there are really things that are best approached as high as possible in these on these geographical levels. So let's say standardization or regulation. I think those fit very well for the EU level. But one of your suggestions there around tax reform, I think that's a really interesting thing to try at the Nordic level, because I think it's inherently difficult with tax reform, because it's always a national concept, and it's difficult for one country to move while other countries are not moving. So if there could be something done there at the Nordic level, I think that would be extremely important. And I think maybe that's the best part of this report, according to me, that you lift this very important suggestion.
Great to hear. Thank you, Ann-Charlotte. Elin,
Yes,
what is top of your mind, and what is your response on the conversation today?
I just want to say that I'm blown away by this event. I think it's fantastic. It's very timely. And I think the things, since I've been working on the Nordic level for a very long time when it comes to circularity, I think this is something that I've been trying to push for a long time. And I'm so happy to hear that everybody thinks that it's moving too slow. And that's also what we've been saying at both at CradleNet and Nordic Circular Hotspot, which I'm in charge of. And Yes. So one of the things that I also hear a lot is that there needs to be a stronger push from the business sector, and the networks that I run is business networks, and they really want to get that message out that we need to move faster. They need support from the policy side, but there's very little interest. And so this is why both the report and this event is so important. There are so many things that needs to be happening now, especially when the war is going on. We see there's a big need, but it's moving too slowly. And I also think that one of the things that you say in your report, that the circular economy is a key component of the 2030 vision for the Nordic Council of Ministers to become the most sustainable and integrated region in the world. We are not feeling it at the moment. We are not seeing it, and this is why it's so good to have this report, to mention this again, and to say that there's a big need for businesses to have a strong leadership from the Nordics joined together. Right now it's very scattered, and we need to have a Nordic vision and a roadmap, and especially a strong target. When are we supposed to be done? A deadline is needed.
Great, thank you, Elin. And also I just want to say this is financed by the Nordic Council of Ministers. So we hope, and also we have in the Nordic Council of Ministers, for the people that don't know, we have the Nordic companies, and in the Nordic countries. So we hope that this report will give a big echo in the Nordics. So. Our suggestion from the report for possible areas to create closer Nordic cooperation on circular economy is what you have caught as well. A common Nordic circular economy strategy focusing on high potential solutions and value chains, exchange experiences on circular economy tax reform, exchange experience on harmonized standards, definition, access to data, and also knowledge transfer and learning from the frontrunners. So Elin and Ann-Charlotte, these suggestions, I know that Ann-Charlotte mentioned, and she was so happy that we have just mentioned tax reform. Any other comments on our suggestions? Should we start with Ann-Charlotte again?
Yeah, I mean, apart from the tax reform, then that I think it's really good that you mention here and emphasize in your report. I think that also this joint strategy or roadmap, I would say that probably the most important part of that would be to set goals, to set measurable goals for all countries, and follow that up regularly. I think that might be stronger than sort of creating roadmaps at the Nordic level. I think the roadmaps and the strategies might need to go down to national level. But if you make all countries set the goals that are measurable, I think that's really important. And another thing,
I just want to say there, Ann-Charlotte, because Terry just mentioned in the beginning that they also do the follow-up.
Exactly. And I think that we don't have that in Sweden. I think they have in Finland. I'm not sure about the other countries, but I think that there definitely could be a much more level playing field if all countries had the goals like that. And then I also want to mention the knowledge sharing, and I think that that's also extremely important. And also there, I think Finland is a good example. They have their circular economy in the school curriculum, which is so important. And in general, I think that might be something that has been a bit left out maybe in the discussion today, that business is driving, policy and politics needs to be driving more. I think we all agree. But politics will not be driving if people are not aware of, in general, are not aware of this as a very important topic for the future. I think actually that in the general public, I think that circular economy is still not a very well-known concept, and there is no understanding that this is key to for example, achieve the climate goals. So I think that connection needs to be much clearer in the general discussion.
Yeah.
Overall.
Thank you for saying that, Elin.
Yeah, I think it was interesting that also that Jette Gutterlund said that she was shocked that the Swedish or the Nordic countries were not frontrunners in the circular economy, because we are looked upon as frontrunners when it comes to sustainability, but in this case we're not. And we have all the opportunity because we are a very rich region, and we have all the opportunities to actually take the lead and becoming the frontrunners that we once were in the sustainability sphere. So this is something that I would really like to emphasize again, that we have all the tools needed to actually take the lead. And right now it's just Finland. All the other Nordic countries are lagging behind. So my suggestion is that we should kind of try to catch up with Finland and align the different country goals and targets and maybe roadmaps to catch up with Finland, because then we will become the frontrunners again. And I think that would also make everything so much easier for the Nordic companies, because then they will have an equal playing field for the whole Nordics, because right now they are focusing on very different things in the different strategies.
I also want to ask you, Elin, how is the collaboration in the Nordics today, based on your experiences?
Well,
Collaboration
there's very
around circular
little
economy.
collaboration at the moment. That's why we started the Nordic Circular Hotspot. We saw that there was a big gap, no platform, no infrastructure to actually meet between the countries and discuss this. There is the Nordic Council of Ministers working group, but they have very little funding, and there's a very little focus on circularity, as you heard. So there needs to be more funding going into these types of infrastructure, and make sure we actually can collaborate and have knowledge sharing and share good examples and so on, which is very important, as you mentioned in the report as well. We do that at the Nordic Circular Hotspot, but there needs to be much more of these platforms, and it would be great if the governments would fund this, not just grassroots movements. So there's much more need to be done.
Thank you. And Anne-Charlotte, the same question to you. The collaboration in the Nordics, what is your experience, sis?
Yeah, my experience too is that it's not very well developed. Within the Nordic Circular Hotspot, which is one of the few examples, we have started a group in the finance industry, which is actually cross-Nordic, trying to move that industry, because we think that industry is one of the most important to get the transition going, and also it has a very sort of pan-Nordic or cross-Nordic activity today. So that might be a good example that hopefully will develop during this year in the finance industry. And I also would like to mention another area where I think we could work more, because as I said, I don't think there are lots of good examples, and that is research. I mean, I am a researcher, but research is still very national or European oriented. And I think that more open research calls at a Nordic level with sort of mixed funding would also be something very valuable to drive this forward.
Thank you so much. What do you think is what is the most important effort, if you say so, that we would need to get more of Nordic collaboration? And just need a short response on that. What is the most important effort that could help us for more Nordic collaboration? Who wants to start? Elin.
No, but I think there's a need to have a bigger focus on these issues. And if we have a bigger focus and we start working together and we align the targets that I talked about before, then I think a lot will happen. We already see the fantastic driver, the CSRD mandatory reporting now coming for circularity. So we can just get the politicians.
That will certainly change a lot.
Be very good.
Yeah, thank you. And short from Anne-Charlotte. What would we need?
I think it's difficult. I think somehow using the Finland as the good example they are, lifting that to the rest of the countries and see that we should all be able to do at least this.
Thank you so much, Elin Bergman and Anne-Charlotte Mellqvist, for giving your perspective. We are wrapping up now, because we are going to end this webinar, and I just want to say a big thank you to all the speakers. I want to say a big thank you to all that have been listening and sending in questions, and some of them we missed, sorry for that. I just want to say welcome to Stockholm in November, and because then we will have a new seminar about the same theme. We will have some new insights, and we will also launch a report again just to keep the focus on the agenda. And if you think and are frustrated you didn't talk about this and you missed that, please send us an email, and you can find our information here at the Haga Initiative, where you also can find the report. So thank you again for listening and for all your inputs. And I hope you have a great day. Bye.